Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the Battle of Lunéville in Arracourt, Multiman Publishing's latest addition to the Battalion Combat Series. So here's the state of the battlefield on the start of turn 2, September 19th. And if you don't remember, I should say, here's the sequence of play. So we're in the pre-turn phase and we have to roll for weather. Weather is 1 dice roll, a 1, so it's still raining. Visibility is 2 hexes and traffic ability is poor. And we roll to see now if the allies get Bazooka Charlie. A 2, they get no extra air points for this turn. And now we roll for replacements. So the red die will be the Axis replacements, blue die will be the American replacements. So with 1 die, the allies get 0 AV replacements, 0 non-AV, simple enough. With 2, the Germans get 0 and 0. So no replacements on September 19th, turn 2. And now we don't need to apply replacements, prepare reinforcements. There's no reinforcements for either side in this scenario on turn 2. And now we assign. And for support, I think what the 111th Panzer is going to do is we're going to put the Stug company into support. So we're going to flip it into support to give it the real AV, and that's going to be able to get to these infantry units. So now they'll have AV support. And I'm pretty sure I can do that even though it's in the ZOC of this recon battalion. If I'm not, correct me in the comments. And now we don't do orders, so now we determine first player. Again, red will be German, blue will be Americans. So the Germans go first this turn. So for their first activation, the Germans are going to try to activate the 21st Panzer, but there's a special rule called enforced recovery for Arracourt. So basically, if you're at FAT 3, which the 21st Panzer is, you can either flip it to its use side and function normally in the turn with an HQ starting as used, so we have to try for a second activation, or we flip the headquarters to done to reduce it to FAT 2. And this is one of those things where if I were doing a longer scenario, I would probably just flip it to done because there's not much the 21st Panzer can do in this situation, but since this is the last turn of the scenario, we're going to flip it to use and try for a second activation. So in a 5 or 6, we get that second activation. If not, then it goes back to the American side. At 2, we don't, so 21st Panzer is done for the turn and the scenario, and they're not going to be an active participant in the rest of this Battle of Lunéville. So the first activation for the American turn is we're going to try to activate Combat Command A to do some artillery barrages on Lunéville, and then on the next activation we'll send in Combat Command Roberts infantry to try to retake the victory hex. And it's going to be hard to get a full activation for Combat Command A because basically the trains aren't optimal distance, they're using tracks, and well, I'll show you. So they're at fatigue 2 for -2. They're coordinated for -1 for -3 total. They are currently mixed. Yep, they're currently mixed with 2nd Cavalry Group's blob. So that's a -1. So -1, -2, -4. And their tracks, and the MSR uses tracks with poor traffic ability because it's raining. So it's a -6. We'll see if they can even get an activation. Oh, okay, so a 5. That's a partial activation. It's about as good as it's going to get. So we're activated. Still coordinated though because we're still mixed. And we only get 1 objective marker, which will be enough. And they have 2 artillery points, which we're just going to drop both on the 111th Panzer Division's unit, Panzer Brigade's units in Lunéville. So like before, we're in a city hex. We need a 5 or a 6, and it's two hits per or 2 rolls per unit. So since this is a Panzer Grenadier Battalion and a Pioneer Company, so blue, these 2 blue will be the Panzer Grenadier Battalion, 2 red will be the Pioneer Company. Let's see what we roll. We get 1 6 on the, the Pioneer Company. So that's 1 hit. The Pioneer Company is down to 1 step. And that was our 2 artillery barrages. So, you know, not bad. I mean, it would have been nice to get 4 hits, but you can't always get what you want, they say. And now, I don't want to move A company because then our trains are going to be exposed. I guess I really didn't have to drop this objective mark. Well, so I think that's going to be Combat Command A's turn complete. I don't see any reason to counterattack into 15th Panzer Grenadier Division. I don't see any point kind of just, going north or anything, moving anybody. So yeah, that's the Combat Command Able's turn complete. They're not isolated. Sorry, first activation complete. For the fatigue roll, we did drop a combat objective. So we roll for fatigue. Don't increase our fatigue with the roll of a 3. So that's first activation. And we might as well go for a second activation because we can drop more artillery on them. So on a 3 or higher, a 2 doesn't quite make the cut. Combat Command Able is done for the scenario. And of course, I did forget something. Buried under A Company was Combat Command A's combat trains, which were on their ghost side, which should have added another -1 modifier on the snafu roll, but that didn't matter. It would have been a partial activation either way. But that on that activation, our first activation, we should have made their combat trains normal again. So now that is Combat Command A's turn activation complete. And for the German activation, we're going to activate the 111th Panzer Brigade. So let's check out what their snafu modifiers are. They're fresh, they're not coordinated, they're not mixed, no game specific. Trains are optimal for +2 overall, but they do have ghost trains because we moved them last turn, so -1, and so it's a +1 overall for this snafu roll. And that's a 10, plenty enough for a full activation, though I don't know what they're going to be doing. They do have 1 artillery point, but I think what we're going to just do is kind of drop a double objective marker on Combat Command Roberts Infantry, and we're going to flip these guys to their leg side to get them the 1 extra action rating. And as you can see, they're not terribly great infantry units with only an action rating of 3. So now we're going to attack the armored infantry and the engineers in Lunéville. So it's a 3 action rating unit versus a 4 action rating unit. The attackers do have red AV support because we put that stewed company into support. So that's a +1, +2 for the double objective zone. We're going to add, use the 1 assigned artillery point to this attack for +2 for the suppression mission, and they're being assisted by the pioneers who are still in the hex with them. So +1, +2, +4, +5 And then the 3 action rating is 8 overall for the Germans. For the Americans, they have the support of the tank destroyer company, so they have exactly 2 units in the hex, and they are in a city hex. So +2, 3, 4. So it's an 8 to 8, just a straight up die roll. It's a pretty good roll. It's a 9. And let's see, we have A1 gets a loss if they're prepared defense. They're not. The defender, it's a situational treat, but they're in key terrain because the city is considered key terrain, so they don't retreat. But they take 1 step loss because instead of retreating per defending unit, which means, unfortunately, both American units are down to 1 step now. That's the German attack complete. And now, I don't think the 111th Panzer needs to do anything else. This activation, all their other units seem good. We're going to flip the combat trains to unghost them, so it just happens off camera. And that is it for this activation. Now, is it worth? Well, I'm sorry. We need to roll for fatigue, of course. 6, no fatigue increase. Now, do we want a second activation? I think the prudent thing to do is to go for it. We're still fresh. 4 or higher, we get a second activation. We get it. So 111th gets another activation, and this will allow them to do that attack again and try to kick out the American infantry. So on the snafu table, we are fresh, +1, not mixed, optimal for +2. We're not ghosted anymore, and we're not mixed or anything. So +2 on this die roll is a 7, which is just barely enough for a full activation. And so we're going to drop the objective marker, same spot, same DRMs, still get the 1 artillery point for the Germans for the suppression mission. So it's a straight die roll. 6, that's not as good. That's a attacker loss. So it kind of evens out. The Panzer Grenadier Battalion needs to take the loss because they were the lead unit, but they still have 5 steps. So I'm thinking now probably would have been prudent to put the 111th Panzer Brigade into a prepared defense since we know the counterattack is coming. But you know what? I forgot about it until now. So it's too late to do that. And so without anything else to do, the 111th Panzer just needs to roll for fatigue. A 1, we finally increase our fatigue to 0, but that's not going to affect the rest of the game. Now, it is the Americans' turn. Basically, it comes down to Combat Command Robert and whether they're going to be able to get a retreat onto the Panzer Grenadiers in Lunéville. So with Combat Command Robert, he's over here. We look at the snafu table. So they are fatigue level 1 for -1. They're coordinated for -2. They're mixed for -3, but their trains are optimal for +1. They're crossing the streams for -1, so that looks like a -3 to me on this snafu roll. So a 5 is a partial. It's not exactly what they wanted. Actually, I don't think it really matters, does it? Because we're not moving. We only need 1 objective, which is here. So yeah, I guess, okay. We just didn't want a failure. And now C Company is going to try to be some heroes and attack into Lunéville. So on the combat table, we have, for the Americans, they have an action rating of 4. They have the support. It's not a double objective zone. We're getting a suppression mission from Combat Command Robert's attached artillery point for +2. They're getting assisted from the engineers, and none of the other things apply. So we have a 8 for the Americans, and then on the German side we have 3. They have the Stug support. They're not in prepared defense. Does contain 2, and we're getting city defense. So the Germans have 7 overall. So it's a +1 overall for this die roll. For the Americans, this is a big one. This pretty much will decide the game, unless I'm missing something. An 11, could that do it? I think it will. An 11 is a defender loss of 1 from his AR unit, and the defender has to retreat. So the 2nd Battalion goes down to 4 steps, and now the whole stack has to retreat. So we retreat based on this retreat execution table. It's off the combat table, it's an automatic retreat, and we're a leg or truck MA, so we have to retreat to within 1, basically we go to the headquarters refuge. We can retreat at least 3 hexes and end within 1 hex of its headquarters. We flip it to its move side. Retreat at 3, 1, 2, 3. Oops. We move the Pioneer Company on its move side to the same hex. And it gets a headquarters refuge. And we'll move the Valiant Armored Infantry unit with 1 step. It's a company, 1 step remaining, just beat off a battalion and a Pioneer Company somehow. Kind of crazy, but I like it. It's good old-fashioned American heroism. So the reserve combat, I'm calling them the reserve. I'm pretty sure Combat Command Robert was the reserve combat command for the 4th Armored Division. If I'm wrong, correct me. But they have now liberated Lunéville, and I don't see how the Germans can take it back in this scenario. I made a couple blunders, but I also profited by my blunders, so I think it evens out. The last thing we have to do with Combat Command Robert is move the 35th Armored Battalion with half movement because it is partial activation. They're not going to get very far, so I think we'll probably just move them. We're going to move Advance After Combat the engineers as well. And we're going to do something silly. I'm going to move the Shermans of the 35th Armor Brigade into the town. Yes, so that's Combat Command Robert's turn complete. Or activation complete, I should say. Now we just have to roll for fatigue. A 5, we're good. And now we have to decide, do we want a second activation? I don't think we do. I think we're just going to call them done. Because we're not going to do another counterattack. We have the victory hex. So yeah, I think we're just going to sit on our laurels in this case. And now the Germans have only 1 formation left to activate since the 113th Panzer Brigade left the map. That is the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division. There's not much they can do, but we're going to activate them just to see. Maybe we'll think of something clever. So 15th Panzer Grenadiers are fatigue 1. Their MSR is complete and optimal for a +1. They are coordinated, or they were coordinated, so they get the -1 for the coordination marker, but then it gets removed because they're no longer coordinated. So -1, -2, +1 for a minus, and then the poor trafficability with tracks is -2. So -3 overall on this die roll is an 8. It's a full activation. Now I have to decide, where do we want to drop the objective marker? Might as well just drop it in the Lunéville hex. So I don't know that there's a way the Germans can win this one. We can't come in through the north through 2 Sherman companies. I don't see a way. The only way I can think of is getting these guys, this Panzer Recon Battalion around here. They'll have to get through this stopping engagement of the Armored Recon, and then they'll have to get in further to somehow boot out the people, the infantry in the city hex. So I'll move them to here, and then we'll do our stopping engagement. All right, so we have our stopping engagement now. We're not in a double objective zone, so it's a straight up dice roll because AV and AR is the same for both. And 8 is a both loss. So the Armored Recon Battalion, or Armored Panzer Recon Battalion is down to 1 step. The Americans are also down to 1 step. And now, so here's the problem. We didn't break the stop. And we only have 1 fire event left. If we use it on the second engagement, we can't then move the Armored or Panzer Recon to attack them. Can we get the Pioneers there on their leg side because they're unprepared on their move side and don't have the assault arrow? So they have to make this attack with their leg side, and they get half 1, half 2, half 3. I think they would be able to make it to this hex. So we might as well go for the second. We have to destroy them to eliminate the Zoc and allow the Pioneers to move through. So same thing, no die roll modifier, just straight up. A 10, that's a target loss and retreat. So we destroyed the 2nd Recon Battalion of the 2nd Cavalry Group. So 2nd Cavalry Group is just completely eliminated from the map as far as I can tell. Unfortunately, poor guys. They really got caught out. Had some faulty intelligence. Should have been recalled. Okay, now we have some options. So the 115th Panzer Recon Battalion, they're done, or they're finished. They don't have any more fire actions. So the Pioneers now have half 1, half 2, half 3. And let's see if we can get, so these Panzer Grenadiers can get in their half tracks or trucks, and they're going to drive down to here. They can't get in this hex because there's already 2 units there. So they're going to get down into this hex. And the way I played, at least, I would have to look in the rule book, but I don't think units from different formations can assist on attacks. At least that's how I've been playing it. If I'm wrong, again, correct me. But either way, the Pioneers will have a assist unit to help them with this attack. Here we go. This is the big one. I'm really surprised 15th Panzer Grenadiers are able to pull this off. So they have in support some Jagdpanzers with red AV, which will get them the appropriate support. So that's +1. They're in a double objective zone for +2. We're going to use a suppression mission for +4 overall, and they're assisted for +1 for +5 overall. And they have a 4 action rating, the Pioneers do. So this is a 9 for the Germans. And for the Americans, we have a 4 action rating. They have the support. They have exactly 2 combat units. And they're in a city hex. So they're at 8. So it's a +1 for the Germans. This is it. So just to give you a preview, anything less than a 10 is only a situational retreat, and since the Americans are in a key hex, they're not going to retreat. But actually, they're only on 1 step. So they would get destroyed, and then the Germans can move in. So what we really need, or what the Americans really need, is a 6 or below on a +1 on 2 die. It's not looking good. So that's so close. That's a 7 + 1 is 8. So the attacker loses 1, but then it's a situational retreat, which means Combat Command Robert's 2 units, even though they're in key train, they lose a step. Since they're both on 1 step, they both are destroyed. The Pioneers lose a step, so they're at 2 steps now. And now there's traffic. So the American Hex gets a traffic marker, and the Pioneers advance after combat into the Hex. And that's it. I think that's it. I don't think there's anything else to do. The 15th Panzer Grenadiers can end their turn, and they're in control of Lunéville. Wow, that surprised even me. When I pull something off like that in these games, I usually feel like I played a rule wrong or something. But I'm looking over it now, and I'm not seeing that I did anything wrong. So it looks like the Pioneers conducted their counterattack and were able to retake Lunéville. I guess this is what it meant in the scenario introduction when it said that the fighting was so confused there was no idea who actually was in control of Lunéville at the end of the scenario. And this kind of reflects that. But the Americans now would need to, I think, later in the game, the campaign game, the full scenario, the Americans get a lot of infantry reinforcements coming in from over here. I think the French Armor Division maybe comes in from over here. So that, I think, would need to counterattack, obviously, try to retake Lunéville. And in the full game, Combat Command A has a pretty commanding position around Arracourt and the hills that are surrounding it. So yeah, that's scenario 3, the Battle of Lunéville, completed. I don't think there's anything else I need to do. Wow, that was a really surprising end, and I'm kind of really pleased with how that turned out. Hopefully I didn't make any or too many blunders, either strategically or rule-wise. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you see anything that I could have done better or something that I goofed off on, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next battlefield.